My family called us into the study like it was a holiday, leather folders stacked like gifts, the air smelling of lemon polish and old money. My mother smiled beneath her pearls, my father cleared his throat, and my siblings opened envelopes that changed their lives in a breath. When my folder dropped into my hands, it felt like a mistake. Inside, a check that could not buy back what they took. 3 sentences later my identity was erased. I learned, in front of everyone I loved, that the last 32 years of my life had been a carefully kept secret. I would never be free of that moment. If you want to follow every twist of this story, hit like, subscribe, and comment. Your voice matters. My family arranged us in familiar chairs around the walnut table of the Langley family study as if a portrait might be painted of the moment. The afternoon sun slanted across oak panels, catching the mother-of-pearl clasp on my mother's necklace. Evelyn Langley moved with the deliberateness of someone who had rehearsed every smile. Harold, my father, sat with his hands folded, the same way he had when he taught me to tie a Windsor knot at 14. Oliver leafed through the legal pages faster than any teenager should have to. Sophie's jaw worked a little as she read, and Mason was scanning the pages for the car keys more than the fine print. "Children," Evelyn began, and the single word had the gravity of a court summons. "Harold and I have arranged everything carefully. It's time to secure the legacy." Quieter than thunder, she passed out leather portfolios with the family crest stamped in gold. The study smelled of cedar and old coins. The grandfather clock in the hall struck twice and then 3 times while my pulse did something entirely different. Oliver's portfolio made his eyes go wide. "You can't be serious," he breathed. Sophie started to cry, but not in the way I expected, more like the kind of grief you save for someone else's funeral. Mason laughed, half incredulous, the other half the triumph of someone who already knew he'd be driving something expensive soon enough. They were being handed the world. I opened mine expecting the familiar, the small comforts, the reassurance that while I'd chosen a different life, the family would still be family. Instead I found a cashier's check for $50,000 and a 2-sentence note on Langley and Partners letterhead, "For your years with our family. With love, Evelyn and Harold." The room went very quiet. I read the note 3 times, as if repetition could rearrange the facts into something kinder. "Is there another envelope?" I asked before I realized how small my voice sounded. Evelyn's face hardened with a slowness that made my bones go cold. She stepped forward, pearls cool under her chin. "Ethan," she said, "my name, there's something we should have told you much earlier." Her voice was clinical, surgical. "You were adopted at 3 months. Your birth mother was a teenage girl who could not keep you. We brought you into our family. But legally, the Langley Trust specifies blood descendants only." Her mouth didn't twitch. The words landed on me like a shipped crate full of stones. For 32 years I had been Ethan Langley, Sunday brunches, holiday photos, summer camps, the house with the carriage lanterns and the study where I'd learned to read by the fire. I'd been the son who chose veterinary school instead of the distribution business. I'd been the one who came home on weekends and fed the old collie, who fixed the leaky fence, who spent childhood summers learning the languages of fur and feather while my siblings learned the languages of markets and mergers. I sat back as if the chair might betray me and collapse under the new weight. "You told me I was one of you," I said. "Why tell me now?" "We thought it kinder," Harold murmured, eyes dropping to the legal pages. "We thought you'd live your life without the complications." "Kind?" I laughed then, a short, ugly sound that surprised me. "Kind?" They'd kept my life like a secret ingredient that wouldn't spoil a dish. They decided I should be happy with love but not with legacy. Oliver's hand brushed my shoulder as he left the room. Sophie's tears looked less like sorrow and more like an apology she'd been taught to rehearse. Mason made a show of leaving slowly, making sure his new Bentley keys jingled in his coat pocket. I left the estate without saying goodbye, moving through rooms that had housed every private corner of my childhood, the banister I'd slid down when I was 8, the kitchen table where we'd fingerprinted salamanders in spring. Each memory had been carefully arranged like an exhibit, until I learned I was never meant to belong in the collection. My car took me back to Portland as if it knew where I belonged. The drive blurred, the interstate ribboned and hummed, and the past peeled itself off me in layers of stunned disbelief. Melanie met me at the clinic doorway, gradebook tucked under her arm, the small brown backpack of the kindergarten class still slung over one shoulder. Her face drained when she saw me. "They told me," I said as if that explained anything. "They told me I'm adopted. They gave me $50,000 and a note." She wrapped her arms around me like an anchor. "You are still you," she whispered into the hollow behind my ear. But I was hollow. The veterinary hospital smelled like antiseptic and hope, clean, useful smells that had nothing to do with the deep, impossible betrayal of kin. That night, grief yielded to a new engine. I needed facts. I needed the ledger of my life. Who was my birth mother? Why had they adopted me and kept it secret? What else had they lied about? And if the trust was blood only, then how many other secrets were being kept in bank safes and lawyer drawers? I found Chester Pike through a neighbor who loved her dachshund more than the city zoning board. Chester was a retired private investigator with a stern jaw and a warm laugh, one of those men people thought of as safe to hand hard truths to. When I told Chester what had happened, he didn't ask for time. If someone's been lying to you for 32 years, he said, they've left a paper trail. We find the trail. We started with the paperwork that had been waved like a cloak by Evelyn and Harold, private adoption, handled quietly. Chester moved like a man who'd done this before. He knew the dance of records and long-retired attorneys. Private adoption means cash, means signatures, means somebody paid to keep the lights off, he said. But money talks, sometimes forever. We follow the money, we follow the people who moved it. The first stops were old lawyers and older files. Jerome Blackwell, the Philadelphia attorney who'd handled closed adoptions in the early 90s, had kept a careful file. He was brittle and apologetic in equal measure when he handed over a folder that smelled like dust and ink. Inside, a surrender form, a single name, Penelope Marsh, age 19, no father listed, a stack of bank withdrawal slips dated in sequences that looked like someone had appointed a machine to draw cash. Why did they pay? Chester muttered, flipping through a yellowing ledger. Who ordered the sequence? When I read Penelope's name I felt something like a throat tighten inside my chest. There was no address current, only an old Philadelphia street and a note, left town within 3 months. No photo, no further contact. Chester glanced up. People who pay for disappearances often work for people who can make problems go quiet. Corporate men, politicians, families that prefer their gardens pruned. Pruned? I pictured my mother, white-gloved, pruning a life until only the branches she wanted remained. Then Chester said the sentence that split the case in two, "There's one more document, Mr. Langley." She left instructions. If her child ever came looking, give him this letter. A letter. The idea made my hands shake. For 32 years someone had known I might come. Someone had thought about this. Chester's office smelled like cigarettes and coffee. He made the call to a small New York firm that represented a woman who'd died 5 years past. They read the terms and promised to forward the envelope. It arrived 2 weeks later, soft paper folded into itself like a carefully kept secret, and when I unfolded it the handwriting, bold, nervous, made my lungs empty. Ethan, if you are reading this, I am gone. I was never brave, but I loved you more than the air. If you can, find the truth. Tell them you are real. Signed, Penelope Marsh. The signature was a key. The rest would be a door. Chester leaned back. You ready to knock? I closed my eyes and felt the timber of the Langley study still under my skin, the clock, the portraits, all of it rearranged. I'm ready, I said. We would start with bank ledgers, subpoena requests, and the uncomfortable questions to people who thought time could bury memory. We would call every name that smelled faintly of money and secrecy. And on the edge of that night, between the light I'd lived under and the truth I chased, I understood something simple. The $50,000 they'd handed me wasn't charity. It was a bribe disguised as kindness. It was a price for silence. I would either buy myself back my life or spend the rest of it proving why the silence had to end. The envelope from Penelope had the weight of a life, small, folded paper that had lived in a lawyer's safe for decades, now suddenly hot in my hand. Chester watched me open it like a man who'd seen strangers fall apart and get better. The handwriting was rushed, the ink slightly smudged as if the author had written while someone knocked at the door. Ethan, if you are reading this, I am gone. I don't know if those who took me meant to take you too, or if fate did. I was 19. I was stupid and scared and I thought I could make it alone. When it got too dangerous, I signed papers. I was paid. I thought it would be a clean cut. It wasn't. I never stopped looking for you. If you found this, find the man who paid. His name is Rowan Hayes. He runs shipping and logistics and he likes things to be tidy. He'll deny it, but he'll know. Tell him your name. P. 3 words made the room tilt, Rowan Hayes. I'd heard that name before, on the radio, on billboards, a logo on the side of trucks, Hayes Global Logistics, one of those companies whose fleet swallowed interstate like a mouth of metal. Chester's jaw tightened. Big fish, he said, brakes on the investigation now grinding into gear. Bigger than a private adoption. If Penelope named him, she knew enough to be dangerous. Rowan Hayes is the sort of man who pays to tidy lives. We moved fast after that. Chester dug into corporate records, subpoenaed bank logs, and thumbed through a decade of public filings. I learned how much money could sound like silence. What Chester found wasn't a single wire but a pattern, withdrawals, cash payments, a series of transfers routed through shell accounts the way someone cleans a stain from linen. The trail bent toward Hayes Global just when you thought it would vanish. Penelope's $50,000 had been a withdrawal from an account that later showed regular payments to a private counsel, payments that matched contracts between Hayes Global and an old family company named Langley Distributions. Langley Distributions. The name was the same as my family's, and suddenly the smell of pruning became suffocating. Someone made sure you never had a claim, Chester said one night over cheap coffee in his cluttered office. Someone put money in the right hands, in the right pockets. And if Hayes had anything to do with it, he didn't do it for a charity. I thought of Evelyn, the smile that folded like a paper fan, the way she'd orchestrated everyone into seats that afternoon. Had she known? Had she pressed a hand to Harold's arm and whispered, "This is Kinder"? The more we dug, the less certain anything felt. Chester arranged a meeting in a cafe that pretended to be private. "You don't just barge into the boardroom of a man like Rowan Hayes," he said. "You need leverage, and you need a plan. Public exposure is a nuclear option. It will tear your family apart, but it will also set your truth free." He slid a sheaf of photocopies across the table, a bank ledger, Penelope's withdrawal, a ledger entry from a shell company called Meridian Holdings. "This is the best confirmation we've got. Not enough to convict at court, but enough to get eyes on the problem. Enough to make Hayes uncomfortable if it reaches the press." I thought about the family portraits that lined the Langley hallway, about Harold's nervous hands, about Oliver's smug certainty that money solves everything. "If I expose him," I said, "what about Mom?" She framed me in their story. Was she a player or a victim? "Maybe both," Chester said. "People who build empires learn to barter. Maybe she traded a secret for power. Maybe she was terrified. Maybe she didn't want to know. You have to decide what you'll do with this knowledge, use it to take revenge or use it to reclaim your life." I slept poorly that week. Every hour my brain rewound the scene of the family meeting, Evelyn's flat voice, Harold's avoidance, the way Mason smirked as if the world had been handed to him on a velvet tray. $50,000 and an old note, those were the parts she had chosen to leave me. The rest she'd hidden in ledgers and smiles. Chester made contact with a reporter he trusted at a local paper, the kind of journalist who loved a slow burn story that exploded when the facts hit the right nerve. "We don't go public yet," he told me. "First we find Rowan Hayes. Then we see what Evelyn knew. If you want to go nuclear, you can. If you want to be smart, we get documents that tie Hayes to the payment. We build the narrative so it can't be gaslit away." We followed the money into Hayes Global's public filings and out again. The company had legitimate contracts with the Langley distribution wing, the timing of payments aligned uncomfortably with Penelope's documents. Then Chester found a line item buried in an old contract, consulting fee, private matter, $50,000. It was small, a dot in a sea of corporate ledgers, but linked with Penelope's withdrawal it flamed into significance. The consultant? An attorney who'd represented both Hayes and, on paper, the Thornfield family. The name was familiar in a new way, Lawrence Voss, a man who crossed from firm to firm in the legal hinterlands where secrecy is a product. We had dust. Now we needed fingerprints. Confrontation felt both terrifying and inevitable. I thought of Penelope's handwriting, of the way her letter asked only that I find the truth. I thought of all the breakfasts, all the sacrifices my parents had claimed to make for me. I pictured Evelyn sitting in the study, carefully placing leather portfolios, mentally arranging the future without me. Had she known Rowan Hayes' name before she pressed my adoption into an envelope and taped it shut with a polite signature? Chester set the meeting. He called Voss's office under the pretense of a routine query about an old contract. The attorney took the bait like he had nothing to hide. When Voss agreed to see us in his paneled office, I felt the old woman in the Langley portrait watching me walk into rooms I'd never been meant to occupy. "Mr. Langley," Voss said, up close in the kind of voice used to reassure anxious clients. He was all expensive tweed and practiced concern. Chester did most of the talking and left me to watch the man's hands. "We've handled sensitive matters for several clients," he said. "Not everything is public because not everything should be. You're a man of reputation, Mr. Langley. Your mother's standing. Did she know of Rowan Hayes' payments?" I asked, my voice steady in ways I had rehearsed but still surprised by. The question landed like lead. Voss blinked, once. Then his smile tightened. "I'm constrained by client privilege." Chester slid the photocopies across the desk. "We have a paper trail," he said. "We have ledgers with the exact dates of the withdrawals that match the amounts paid by Hayes' accounts. We have a letter naming Hayes as the man who paid Penelope Marsh. We're not here for a moral lecture. We want to know, what role did Evelyn Langley play?" Voss's jaw worked. He had a habit of repeating a phrase he'd used in depositions, "I'm not at liberty to say." It was a professional shield, but even shields show seams. "Your mother wanted discretion," Voss admitted finally. "She wanted to protect the family name. She believed, rightly or wrongly, that certain truths would cause more harm than they would fix. She asked me to arrange funds, to facilitate transfers that would keep a scandal from reaching public eye. She was afraid of ruin. The words were a cold wash. She was afraid. Not a defense, an explanation. Chester pressed on. Did she know where the money came from? Did she know it was Hayes? Voss hesitated. I could see the calculation behind his eyes, lawyerly memory colliding with loyalty. She knew only that the money would ensure discretion. She wanted you kept safe. She didn't ask questions she felt might endanger the arrangement. He folded his hands like a man asking for forgiveness he wasn't sure he deserved. Sometimes people make deals they think protect a family. Sometimes those deals bind them. Bind them. The word echoed like a verdict. I left Voss's office with a new kind of ache. Evelyn had chosen a path that purchased quiet at the cost of my truth. Maybe she had thought she was protecting me from men like Rowan Hayes. Or maybe she had been protecting herself. I didn't know yet. But the ledger had teeth now. I had a name, a trail, and a lawyer who'd quietly admitted the existence of a payoff. That night I called my mother's home. Harold had passed away the year before, and reached her answering machine. Evelyn's voice was still on some old holiday greeting. It sounded the same as it had in the study, prim, careful, unbothered. I pictured the leather portfolio on a shelf in the study and felt something shift inside me that bore no name. Chester's plan had moved into the next phase: gather documentary proof tying Hayes to the payments, confront Hayes privately with the evidence, and then decide whether to go public. You'll have to choose what kind of man you want to be, he said. One who takes revenge, or one who takes ownership of his story. I thought about Penelope's letter, her small plea that I find the truth. I thought about the $50,000, framed as charity, handed to me with a note that felt like an insult. I thought about Evelyn's careful hands, about Harold's eyes that never quite met mine at the meeting. I thought about every Sunday brunch where nothing true had been said. In the weeks that followed, the small world around me started to tremble. Chester served subpoenas with the delicacy of a man who knows what happens when a house of cards falls. Hayes Global's PR sent polite denials that read like rehearsed prayers. The local reporter we'd spoken to filed an innocuous inquiry, no headline, nothing dramatic, just enough to make someone at Hayes headquarters look up and ask, who's asking questions? The first real crack came when a ledger entry, a scanned photocopy Chester had obtained through a quiet court filing, showed a chain of transfers initiated from a Hayes account to a shell corporation that had routed funds to a private trust. The amounts matched Penelope's records exactly. When Chester slid the printouts under my hands, the paper felt heavier than its weight. This is enough to make dinner uncomfortable for some people, he said. Not enough to put Hayes in prison yet. But enough to pry a few fingers loose. I realized then I didn't want ruin for the sake of revenge. I wanted the truth to be visible, like a cut open so it could be healed. I wanted Penelope's name known, not buried under another polite veneer of family propriety. I wanted the Langley portraits to reflect what they actually were, a collection of choices, some noble, some cowardly. We would move forward. There would be meetings, letters, the slow unspooling that follows a secret when it is finally shoved into daylight. And somewhere, in a room I had once sat comfortably in, Evelyn Langley would wake and find the quiet she had paid for beginning to fray. The day I confronted Rowan Hayes was the first day in months that the world felt too small to hold what I carried. His headquarters dominated the Chicago skyline, a knife of glass and ambition that stabbed the clouds. It was the kind of building built by a man who wanted the world to look up at him, not down. The kind of building raised by someone who never expected consequences to climb high enough to reach him. Chester insisted on going with me. Men like Hayes don't like being surprised, he warned. But they like being cornered even less. He was right. I didn't want a scene. I wanted truth. The receptionist escorted us through a marble lobby that felt colder than a morgue. Every footstep echoed like a warning. We rode the elevator to the top floor in silence. My palms were sweating. Chester tapped the briefcase, our evidence, twice, like a reminder, we're not walking in empty-handed. Hayes' office was cavernous, the city stretching beneath enormous windows that reflected the man at their center. He stood when we entered, tall, silver-haired, and unervingly calm, like someone used to dismissing problems with a handshake or a signature. Mr. Langley, he said, extending a hand. Or should I say, Ethan? The name hit harder than his handshake. My real name. The name from Penelope's letter. You knew, I said quietly. I always knew, he replied, gesturing for us to sit. Your mother, your birth mother, told me the day she signed the papers. It was the first time I'd ever heard him say your mother with any softness. For a moment, I saw a crack in the corporate armor, regret, maybe. Or guilt dressed in a suit. Chester opened the briefcase and slid the evidence across Hayes' desk. Penelope's letter naming him. The $50,000 withdrawal record from 1992. The Shell Company payment ledger. The attorney's contract referencing a private matter. Hayes studied each page slowly, then leaned back in his chair. "You did your homework," he said. "You did more than homework," I shot back. "You bought my erasure." He didn't flinch. "I bought a solution." Penelope was frightened. She didn't want a public scandal. She asked me to handle it. I did. By paying her off? My voice cracked. By making sure she couldn't keep me? By burying me in someone else's family. He folded his hands. "She asked me to find a family who could give you a life she couldn't. I vetted them. I chose the Langleys." It felt like my lungs shrank. "You chose them?" "Yes," Hayes said simply. "They were wealthy, stable, connected. They fit the criteria." Criteria. That was the word used for selecting real estate or business partnerships, not living children. Chester leaned forward. "Mr. Hayes, your arrangement did not end in 1992. We have records of ongoing payments to the Langleys for years." Hayes didn't deny it. "I wanted updates. I wanted to know he was safe." My voice rose before I could stop it. "Updates? You watched me grow up from a boardroom." His eyes softened. "I watched from afar because I believed it was best. For everyone. Not for me," I said. "Not for Penelope." His jaw tensed, a small tell of something buried deep. Penelope and I cared for each other, but the timing was impossible. I was married. I had obligations. She understood the consequences. "No," I said. "She just didn't have the power to fight you." Silence thickened between us. Chester broke it. "We're not here to debate morality. We're here because the truth surfaced. The evidence is solid enough to embarrass you, Mr. Hayes. Possibly even implicate you." Hayes' expression hardened. "And what do you want?" I answered before Chester could. "Acknowledgement. Answers. The truth from your mouth, not through lawyers or bank slips. And I want you to tell the Langleys to stop pretending I never existed." His eyebrows rose slightly. "That's all?" "For now," I said. "But understand something." I leaned forward. "If I find out you paid them to get rid of me again, this time as an adult, I will burn your polished empire down brick by brick. With my name attached." For the first time, fear flickered behind his eyes. "I see Penelope in you," he murmured. "She had fire." I stood. "I'm not her fire. I'm the aftermath." Before we left, Hayes said one more thing, his voice much quieter. "You should speak to Evelyn. She knows more than she told you." My heart dropped. "Does she know who my father is?" "Yes." The elevator ride down felt like freefall. That night, I drove to Lake Forest with my heart pounding like a second engine. The estate glowed warm and golden under its porch lights, but it looked different now, hollow, like a stage set after the actors have left. Evelyn answered the door in a silk robe, her face tightening when she saw me. "Roland." "Ethan," I corrected gently. My name was Ethan. Her mouth trembled. "I know." We sat in the same study where she'd shattered my life weeks earlier. I put Penelope's letter on the desk. I put the ledger documents beside it. And then I asked the question I'd been too afraid to ask. "Did you know Hayes was my father?" She inhaled sharply, tears brimming. "I suspected. I was told the adoption was private, but when I saw the payment amount, when I met his wife at a charity gala and she wouldn't look at me, I knew." "Why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. "Because I knew what would happen," she said. "If the truth came out, the Langleys would lose everything. Your father," she corrected herself, "Harold, he believed protecting the family meant protecting the lie." "And you?" I asked. "What did you believe?" She covered her face with shaking hands. "I believed we could love you enough to make the truth unnecessary. I was wrong." I felt something in me loosen, not forgiveness, but recognition. "You didn't protect me," I said gently. "You protected the legacy. The name." She sobbed. "I know." Outside, the cold wind carried the sharp smell of pine. I walked to my car with the strange lightness of someone who'd finally learned the story written behind their ribs. Not the story I wanted, but the story that was mine. Chester was waiting in my driveway when I got home. He rolled down the window of his car. "Well," he asked. "I got the truth," I said. "All of it." He nodded. "And now?" I looked at the documents, the letters, the evidence that had pulled my life open like a seam. My voice came out steady. "Now," I said, "we make sure the truth sets the right people free." And with that, the story shifted again, not toward revenge, but toward rebuilding. Toward identity. Toward the life that had always been waiting for me, just beyond the lies. The days following my confrontation with Evelyn Langley and Rowan Hayes felt like breathing unfamiliar air, thin, sharp, and strangely liberating. The truth had finally surfaced, not gracefully but violently, ripping open decades of lies and carefully staged family roles. Now all that remained was choosing what to do with it. Chester stopped by my clinic the next morning with a brown envelope. "You're going to want to see this," he said, setting it on my desk. Inside were documents Hayes had sent, proof of quarterly updates disguised as distribution summaries, a copy of Penelope's medical records, and a handwritten note. In Hayes' elegant, almost painfully precise handwriting. "I failed when it mattered most. I hope someday you let me do better. R.H." I didn't know what to make of it. Regret? An apology disguised as a footnote? Or just another corporate gesture meant to smooth the rough edges of a scandal waiting to erupt? "Your move now," Chester said. "You've got leverage over 2 families. What you do with that leverage determines who you're going to be." "I don't want leverage," I told him. "I want peace." Chester smiled faintly. "Then go find it." Peace, however, is rarely handed over without a fight. 2 weeks later, the Langleys sent me a legal notice, thinly veiled, carefully worded, and colder than a winter storm. It stated, in essence, that the $50,000 check was considered a final and complete severance of my connection to the family, and any attempt to claim emotional or financial damages would be disputed vigorously. It was the last nail in a coffin they'd been building since the day I was adopted. I didn't respond with a lawsuit. I didn't respond with threats. I responded by mailing the uncashed check back to their estate with a note. "You cannot sever something you never truly claimed." 2 days later, Dustin showed up at my clinic. He looked hollow, shadows under his eyes. "I'm done with them," he said. "I'm moving out. I want to stay with you, if you'll let me." I hugged him before I even realized I was moving. "You're my brother," I said. That never changed. He broke down, right there on the sidewalk outside the clinic. The youngest Langley, the one they said had no direction, had more courage than the rest of them combined. Bridget called next. She whispered through tears that she'd known something was wrong with the story but had been too afraid to question it. Quincy called too, trying to sound confident, but there was fear under his voice, fear of losing the one sibling who had never wanted anything from him but love. I told them the same thing. I need time. Truth first. Healing maybe later. They understood. Mitchell Hayes kept his promise. 3 weeks after our meeting, I was invited to a private dinner with the entire Hayes family. It was surreal walking into their penthouse, like stepping into a parallel universe where wealth didn't feel like armor but ancestry. Rebecca Hayes, Mitchell's wife, greeted me with a softness I didn't expect. "I've known about you," she said gently, "longer than you think. Some secrets wound everyone they touch. I'm glad the truth found you." Mitchell Jr. shook my hand with a tight jaw, sizing me up like a political liability he needed to manage. But his siblings, Sarah, Samuel, and Catherine, welcomed me instantly. I realized, sitting at that long glass table with people who shared my nose, my eyes, my stubborn habits, that belonging didn't always grow from years, it sometimes grew from recognition. From seeing yourself reflected in others for the very first time. When dinner ended, Mitchell pulled me aside. "I want you in my life," he said. "Not as an obligation. As my son." "I'm not ready to call you that," I told him carefully. He nodded. "Then call me Mitchell. And let's start there." For once, he didn't look like a titan of industry. He looked like a man trying, truly trying, to repair something he'd broken long ago. As weeks turned into months, my world didn't fall apart the way it might have. It rearranged itself. Dustin moved into my guest room and found structure working at my clinic. He showed up early, stayed late, kept a notebook of every animal's name. For the first time, he wasn't the spare Langley son. He was just Dustin, kind, loyal, funny, and healing. Melanie stood by me through all of it, my anger, my fear, my moments of disbelief, even the nights I woke up wondering if I was still the same man she fell in love with. "You're more you now," she whispered one night. "You're not living under someone else's name anymore." She was right. 6 months after the truth came out, Mitchell attended our wedding. He walked me down the aisle, not because I needed a father figure to claim me, but because I wanted him there in a moment I was finally claiming myself. The Langleys didn't attend. And I didn't miss them. My clinic grew. We expanded into the space next door. I started a small foundation for subsidized animal care, with early donations coming anonymously from the Hayes family until I insisted they put their name on it. If they wanted to be in my life, they had to be in all of it. 1 year after the family meeting that destroyed me, I signed the papers that officially changed my name. Ethan Cray. Not to inherit a fortune. Not to claim a legacy. But to own the truth. The framed $50,000 check still hangs in my office, an artifact of a life built on lies. Beside it is a photo of Melanie, Dustin, and me at our wedding reception. On the other side hangs a simple plaque. Family is the truth you choose, not the lie you were given. If you've stayed with me through this story, through the lies, the betrayal, the identity shattered and rebuilt, then I want to tell you something. You are allowed to search for your truth. You are allowed to walk away from the people who buried it. And you are allowed to choose the family that chooses you back. Because sometimes, losing the family you thought you had, is how you find the one you were always meant for. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think about your own definition of family, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and leave a comment telling us the moment you discovered your own truth. And don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that will stay with you long after they're told.